At Lowe's, get up to 35% off select major appliances. Plus, members get free delivery, install, and more when you spend $2,500 on select major appliances. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 2/25 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. Excludes Massachusetts, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Florida. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Visit Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change.
Visit your nearby Lowe's on East 17th Avenue in Hutchinson.
Welcome back to the Primal Potential Podcast. I am Elizabeth Benton. Thanks so much for joining me. If you're wondering where our normal intro is with the music and the beat, well, this is not our normal episode. We are wrapping up, coming to the conclusion of a special 10-episode series called The Vault. And it's all about building the skill of consistency so that we don't stay in this incredibly frustrating and exhausting pattern of always trying to change our behavior and feeling like we never really get there. We do well for a little while, and then we get derailed by something, and then we come back to it eventually, but it's this cycle that feels hard to change. And so much of that is stemming from the fact that we've never intentionally developed the skill of consistency. The way that if you wanted to play the piano, you'd intentionally develop that skill. And if you just tried to pick at songs here and there by ear, it wouldn't be anywhere near as effective as building a strong foundation of skills for the piano. This episode in particular, this is part 9. If you haven't caught the first 8 series or episodes in this series, please go back and do that. It is hugely important. You don't want to just rely on this one, but if you've just found this one, I'm so glad you're here. Definitely check out episodes 1 through 8, never mind our 1,000+ episodes that we did before we got into this 10-episode series. This episode in particular, if I could pick one and say, hey, focus here, I think it might be this one. We can't have a real conversation about consistency without addressing one of the most powerful and overlooked forces in our lives. And I truly do mean overlooked. And that is the stories we tell ourselves. I want to start with an example because sometimes when I talk about this, it's hard to recognize it in our own lives because we don't know where we're telling ourselves stories, and that's a big part of the problem. I've got a client, love her, I think she's amazing. And one of the things we were talking about recently is that she wants to make some changes to her lunch routine, and she wants to make them consistently. She kind of does it for a while, and then she's off, but she wants to be very consistent with specifically eating more protein and more vegetables at lunch. Here's what she told me. She said, Elizabeth, the problem is, every time I do this, I start cleaning up lunch and having more protein and veggies, it triggers this all or nothing diet mentality, and I rebel against it, and I end up binging, and then I'm afraid that I'm just never going to stop. And so it's kind of gotten me to the point where I'm hesitant to even try. I have zero doubt that she believes this is how it goes. I have zero doubt that this has been the pattern in the past. What's happening, though, is she goes to make these changes, and unsurprisingly, she's right. She's right. She starts to make these changes, and then she feels like a diet, and she's not as emotionally satisfied by the food, and so then she's looking for satisfaction after the meal, and maybe I should have some chocolate, or this, that, and the other thing. That's the track she keeps going down. And this might be one of the most important things you hear in this entire 10-episode series. For so many of us, we're not living according to what is true. We're living and choosing according to what we believe is true, and they're often quite different. We typically don't stop to question whether the beliefs we have are just stories that we've repeated so many times they feel like facts. Stories that we've repeated so many times, we've carved these deep tracks into the road, tracks we keep driving down, even when we say we want to go in a different direction. And a lot of times we don't even realize the difference between objective reality and a narrative we've adopted. And we think we're describing facts, but what we're really describing is a perspective. And that's what stories do. They shape the track our life runs on. Here's what I need you to understand. Our behaviors mirror our beliefs. If we believe that it always goes this way, that we always do it like this, that this always happened, guess what? Our behaviors mirror what we believe to be true, and our patterns follow our perspectives. Our patterns follow our perspectives. If I tell you everything goes great with the kids in the afternoon, I come in from work around 12:30, we've got a good solid couple of hours of like fun, they're excited to see me, we're having a great time, and then 4:00 hits and I'm at the end of my rope, they're at the end of their rope, and the afternoon until bedtime is awful. That is not objective reality. What it is that my behavior mirrors my belief. I start acting different because here we go, it's 4:00. The pattern follows my perspective, not the other way around. Because I can bring a different belief, a different perspective into that same scenario, and wouldn't you know, it unfolds differently. Your belief becomes the track your life runs on. If you're writing things down, that's a good one. Your belief becomes the track your life runs on. And I want you to start thinking about you. Is that what's happening in your marriage? Is that what's happening with your money, with your fitness, with your nutrition, a little bit of everything? I'm going to ask you directly, what is that belief for you? What is that loop that you run inside of? That thing that sounds like, I work out for a few weeks, but inevitably something happens and then I just stop and it's all good until it's not, or I'm good with my budget for a couple of days, but then inevitably I end up justifying X, or as soon as I start with a little bit of weight loss and I start seeing some results, I feel like the pressure's off and I justify overeating. Hey, what is that loop for you? The belief that becomes the track your life runs on, and you think it's a pattern of behavior, but what it actually is a pattern of thought that your behavior follows. What it actually is a pattern of thought your behavior follows. What's that loop that you live inside of? Where do you feel this sense of like, this is the way it always goes? My husband and I can have a few good days and then like something little happens or somebody's in a bad mood and then it blows up into this big thing and we spend 3 days ignoring each other. What is that for you? What is that sense of this is just the way it is? That belief, that story, that's the thing we're talking about today. That's the thing. You have to examine and upgrade. You cannot keep telling the same story and expect that miraculously your behavior is just going to make a hard right turn, because it's not. Right? Your patterns are going to follow that track of belief, that track of perspective. You can't expect a new outcome if you're driving on the same road. So how do we change that? First, we got to recognize what that story is, right? One of the best things you can do is recognize that the story is not a fixed truth. It's not a fixed truth that at 4:00 my kids are tired and cranky, that I'm short-tempered and cranky. The behavior is really following the belief more than the other way around. It's a perspective, and that means it can be shifted. And in fact, it needs to be shifted if we want to see a shift in the way that things unfold. Another client of mine, she's building a business. She wants to build a business, and this is a desire she's had for many, many years. And here's what she told me. She said, hey, every time I start, I get really excited, but then I get a little bit into it and I start to feel discouraged because I'm not making as much money as I think I should, as quickly as I thought I would. And the doubts creep in and I just stop. Right? As soon as it's not this like rocket ship success, if it's slower than I thought it would be or harder than I thought it would be, I just stop. Her behavior mirrors her belief. She's not just telling me this is the way that it's always been. She's telling me this is the way that it's going to continue to be. And hey, she's right. So I helped her craft a new story. One that acknowledges the challenge. We're not trying to put our head in the sand and say like, no. I get excited when things are going slow. I get double down determined when I'm not making as much money as I thought I would. No. What we put together is this acknowledgement of, I know that I'm going to get discouraged when progress feels slow. And progress probably will feel slow because it's a new endeavor. So when that happens, that's where I need to fortify myself. And so I've identified 3 people that I'm going to reach out to who have built businesses before, who know what it feels like to have doubts or to feel frustrated or to wonder if it's ever going to work out. And I'm going to reach out to each of those 3 individually when I start to feel that discouragement coming in, because I know that what they're going to say is going to put me on a different track than the story I've been telling myself of like, so what's the point? And not surprisingly, having a different belief and a different perspective gave her new behaviors. She created a new path. She got on a different track. I always like to give this example of parenting because I think it's very easy to see these types of things when we're not looking at ourselves and our own behavior. It's harder to recognize it in ourselves. I'm in the phase of life with young kids where every night they ask me to tell them a story. I'd be like, Mom, can you tell a story about ice castles? Or my friend's coming over and going in my treehouse. Can you tell a story about, making cookies and going to see the ducks with Grammy? Whatever. Never in a million years would I tell them a story that is about how they're discouraged and defeated and it ended in failure and they're lonely and they're stuck. Never, right? You wouldn't tell kids stories like that. And yet, those are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves all the time. Those are the stories we tell ourselves about our marriage, about our health, about our business, about our finances, about our friendships, about our life in general. We get a little bit ahead financially and something throws us off track and we're like, well, this is what always happens. I start doing well and then inevitably it's this or it's that or it's the other thing. We have one off day with food and this is the way it goes. Like I can do well for a couple of days, but I just can't keep it up no matter how bad I want it. I don't know what's wrong with me. We have an argument in our marriage. This is the way it always is. We just can't stay in a good spot. It's not that these things don't happen, that you don't need new tires or you don't get in a fight with somebody that you love, but it's the belief about them that's what guides what we do next. If the belief is like, here we go again, now we're just going to ignore each other for 3 days. Surprise, surprise, you ignore him for 3 days. The problem is less of the issue. It's the belief that justifies your response that's what we're trying to upgrade. Which is exactly the next step after you recognize like, oh, yeah, I do have this belief that this is the way it always goes and this is what I always do. Once you recognize it, then we have to upgrade it. And as it was in the example with my friend who's trying to start a business, this isn't where we just become like positive and blow smoke up our butts. That's not it at all, right? With my client who is wanting to start a business, we're not saying like, I can do this and building a business is fun and I look at discouragement as a challenge. Like, no. We're not, hey, if that's true for you, God bless. But a lot of people try that positive only approach and it feels really insincere because it is for them. What we're trying to do is upgrade the story to say, what else is possible here? What maybe do I have control over? In what ways am I more empowered than I've been pretending that I am? In what ways maybe do I have assets or tools in my toolbox that I can use to make an impact here? What story is going to help me create a different path? What story is just different than the one I've always been telling? I mentioned earlier that a lot of people have this story of like, I lose some weight and then when I see some results, I feel like I've earned the treat. I don't feel like the pressure's there. I take my foot off the gas. I'm justified in the ice cream, the Mexican food, whatever it is. Maybe the news story is when I start seeing results, it's this really important fork in the road. I know I'm vulnerable to easing up. So this is where I'm going to practice being more intentional. And to start, that's going to look like X. What is the new thing you're going to practice at this crossroads where one option is ease up, go in the opposite direction. The other option is what? This is why I always tell my clients in the consistency course, hey, use your check-ins for that area where you always do this. Use your check-in to say, hey, Elizabeth, now I'm trying to do this. Can you hold me accountable? Can you reach out tomorrow and ask me how it's going? Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's a coach. Maybe it's a mentor. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's just a different pattern. Maybe it's simply a different story. For me, with my kids in the afternoon, that's what it is. It's a different story. I look forward to something special at 4. Instead of like, oh God, 4 is when everything falls apart and it's awful and it's like it's still 2.5 hours until we start getting ready for bed. Now I'm like, I'm going to have intentionally in mind something we look forward to at 4. And it doesn't mean we're like off to the museum. Often we're just at home. But that's when I'm going to pull out the crayons and we are going to make cards for Grammy and we are going to put them in envelopes and we are going to address them and the kids are going to put the stamps on and then we're going to go and we're going to mail cards to Great Grammy. You know, it's so small. Or that's when I'm going to have the kids help me measure the flour, but it's always something, it changes the energy. It does not have to be this big radical shift, but what it's done is we're all now looking forward to 4. The energy is different and nothing changed until my perspective changed. And nothing will change if I'm still believing, oh my gosh, we just got to get to 4 and like push through. When you change the story, you change the behavior. What I want you to remember is that the belief becomes the track your life runs on. And we all have this area where it feels like it always goes like this. So we got to change the belief before we can change the behavior. I know that there are some of you listening right now who like, you get it, it's starting to click, but you're not quite sure what that loop is for you. Or you're not quite sure how to change it. Guys, you don't have to figure it out all on your own. That's why things like the consistency course exist so that people can help you. One of the big reasons you're not moving forward is because you're trying to do it all on your own power. So I know that this might feel new or different or uncertain for you, but what are you going to do about that? Because maybe part of your loop is, I can figure it out by myself. I don't need anybody's help. I don't want to waste any more money. Well, you're wasting time as it is right now. And I might not be your person, right? You might listen and be like, I kind of like your podcast, but I don't want to work with you. That's cool. If you don't want to work with me, I don't want to work with you. And that's the truth, right? I want people who are eager and excited to work with me because, you kind of like, you have a sense for this is my kind of person or this isn't my kind of person. But if you are somebody who's like, yeah, I just don't know how that applies to me. Well, what are you going to do about that? Because we can solve that together really fast inside the consistency course. And maybe you've just been like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend the money. And yet the cost of not reaching your goals far exceeds the $97 that it takes to join the consistency course. I don't know. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe there's something else that you've been putting off, but let's not keep telling the same story because the belief becomes the track your life runs on. And a lot of you are wanting to run on a different track, but you haven't changed the belief. I have an entire program called the Consistency Course that not only has a full framework to personalize this skill of building consistency, but we also have a private daily podcast in there. We have live calls multiple times a month in there. And I do a weekly check-in with my members where you tell me what's going on and I respond to you personally. I'd love to see you in there. I'm going to put the link in the show description. Most importantly, and I think I said this on the last episode, if you've got questions about it, just email me, elizabeth@primalpotential.com. I don't have anybody that manages or monitors my mailbox. It's just me. And I respond to all the emails. So elizabeth@primalpotential.com. And our next episode is our last episode in this series, and I can't wait for you to listen. Talk to you soon.